"Mrs. Coleman, please follow me to your seat," the wedding planner said. Her voice was sweet, but clearly fake, and she held her clipboard tight against her chest, like it was some kind of shield. I smoothed down my navy blue dress, the one I'd spent 3 long months searching for, the one William once said made the silver in my hair shine, and followed her through the glittering hall of the Rosecliff mansion. The chandeliers above sparkled so brightly, they threw little diamond-like reflections across the faces of nearly 400 guests, most of whom I didn't even recognize. Across the room, I spotted my son. William stood tall in his tuxedo, one arm wrapped tightly around his new bride, Veronica, as they smiled and shook hands with her family's wealthy friends. Not once had he glanced my way since the ceremony. The wedding planner's heels clicked across the marble as she led me past tables filled with important people, past the dance floor, past the string quartet. With every step, the knot in my stomach grew tighter. Finally, she stopped at a small table tucked behind a giant flower arrangement, right next to the kitchen doors. "Here we are," she said in a cheerful voice. I stared at the table. 5 seats. My name was scribbled neatly on a little card. Martha Coleman. Somehow, even that elegant script looked like it was mocking me. The other names were strangers: the photographer, the bride's old roommate, a hospital colleague, and someone who used to live near William years ago. The kitchen doors swung open beside me, and a waiter rushed out, the heat and clatter from inside spilling over me. Another nearly bumped my chair as he carried pitchers of water. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Coleman?" the planner asked, smiling, but her eyes were cold. "Assist by the kitchen," I said, my voice coming out smaller than I wanted. "Yes, we had to make last-minute changes for the governor's security detail. I'm sure you understand." She didn't wait for my reply. With a glance at her watch, she hurried off, leaving me alone at the empty table. I sat down slowly, the weight of my 67 years pressing heavier than ever. Across the vast room, I saw William and Veronica seated proudly at the head table with her parents. The Bennetts, practically New York royalty. Their relatives filled table after table in a perfect little display of status. And me, I had the kitchen table, shoved as far away from them as possible, while still technically in the room. Just 3 days ago, William had called asking for my credit card for a small wedding expense. That small expense turned out to be a $93,000 honeymoon in the Maldives. He said he couldn't afford it, but needed to impress Veronica's family. I didn't hesitate. I transferred the money instantly, adding it to the $156,000 I'd already quietly poured into this wedding. No one, not even William's new in-laws, they all believed their perfect daughter had married a self-made surgeon. Another waiter hit my chair with his tray. "Sorry, ma'am," he mumbled before rushing off. I looked across the room. Veronica leaned in to whisper something into William's ear. Her diamond earrings sparkled as she smiled, though it looked more like a smirk aimed right at me. William still didn't glance my way. The photographer, one of my new table mates, sat briefly to set down his extra camera. "I'll be in and out. Hope you don't mind," he said politely before leaving again. Slowly, the rest arrived. Mrs. Winters, an older woman who'd once lived near William, looked around, just as confused as I was. "Aren't you William's mother?" she asked, frowning. "Why on earth are you sitting all the way back here?" I had no answer that didn't sound pitiful. The evening dragged on. The kitchen doors kept swinging, waiters rushing by, plates clattering, chefs barking orders. It became the unwanted soundtrack to our meal. Then the music changed, the start of William and Veronica's first dance. I watched them twirl together. My son's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. My eyes filled as I searched for the boy I once knew, the little boy at 5 years old, proudly tying his shoes for the first time, the 12-year-old grinning ear to ear with his science fair ribbon, the teenager hugging me tight before heading off to college, the young man scanning the crowd for my face as he accepted his medical school diploma, and now, the grown man who didn't look at me once on his wedding day. When did my son stop really seeing me? The answer came quickly, like a sharp memory I couldn't push away. It was the first time he brought Veronica home to Savannah. I remembered the way she looked at my old house, her nose wrinkling, as she called it quaint. Coming from her, that word meant cheap or worthless. I remembered how she'd asked William loud enough for me to hear why he was wasting his time in a small-town practice instead of making real money in New York. As I watched them dance now, glasses clinking all around the room, the truth sank in hard. My seat by the kitchen wasn't a mistake, it was a message. In Veronica's wedding, in Veronica's world, and in the life my son had chosen, I wasn't family, I was help. Good enough to pay, good enough to give, but not worth being seen. And then I wondered, what would happen if I just stopped giving? The reception dragged on, heavy and endless, like a summer day in Tennessee. I sat at my table by the kitchen doors, listening as Veronica's father stood up for a toast. He spoke about his daughter marrying into new American royalty, making guests squirm in their fancy chairs. He talked about William like he was judging a prize horsecould bloodline, fine credentials, strong enough to add to the Bennett family name. But not once did he mention me. Not the mother who worked 2 jobs after her husband's heart attack. Not the mother who ate ramen noodles for a year so her son's college fund stayed safe. Not the mother who sat at the real kitchen table, night after night, reading medical textbooks with him so he could pass his exams. "Are you all right, dear?" Mrs. Winters asked softly, patting my hand. I smiled and lied, just taking it all in. What I was really taking in was the painful truth. My son was a stranger now. Even from across the room, I could see it. The way William waved away servers with a careless flick of his hand. The way his laugh sounded practiced, not real. The way his eyes were always scanning the room, looking for someone more important to notice. Dr. Sampson, the hospital colleague at my table, returned with a scotch and loosened his bow tie. Quite the show, isn't it? Nothing like William's first wedding. I froze. "You were at his wedding to Rachel." "Of course," he said casually. "Small garden ceremony, maybe 30 guests." William grilled burgers afterwards, said it was a family tradition. My throat tightened. Yes, it had been our tradition. My late husband Charles grilled at every milestone, birthdays, graduations, anything worth celebrating. He always said the smell of charcoal meant family. But that was before Rachel left William. After that, my son changed. He threw himself into his work, moved into a flashy apartment, started showing up in society pages. Then came Veronica, with her money, her family, and her endless demands. "I need some air," I whispered, slipping out onto the terrace. The night air was cool, carrying the smell of roses and salt water. For a moment, it cleared away the kitchen stench stuck in my dress and hair. I leaned on the railing, staring at the dark stretch of the Atlantic, when a voice startled me. "Mother," I turned. William stood there in his tuxedo, polished and handsome, but so unfamiliar, it made my heart ache. "Have you been looking for me?" I asked, raising my eyebrows. "I've been rather hard to miss at the kitchen table." For a second, something flickered across his face, maybe guilt, maybe annoyance. The seating was Veronica's job. I'm sure it wasn't intentional. Like not inviting any of my friends wasn't intentional. Or holding the rehearsal dinner on the night of my book club's awards ceremony. His jaw tightened. "Mother, you're making a scene." "There's no one here to witness it," I said, gesturing at the empty terrace. "Just like there's no one at this wedding who remembers you as a child. No one who sat with you through chickenpox. No one who knows you sleep with socks on, even in summer. Mother, please, today is supposed to be perfect." "Yes, I know," I said quietly, smoothing the skirt of my dress, the old nervous habit I'd had since childhood. "Congratulations, William. Veronica is certainly remarkable." He didn't hear the hesitation in my voice. Instead, he glanced at his watch, an expensive Philippe I'd never seen before, and said, "Actually, I needed to talk to you about the honeymoon payment. There was a problem. The resort wants the final payment tonight, not next week." And there it was, the real reason he'd come. "How much?" I asked softly. "Just the last 30,000. I'd cover it myself, but with all the wedding costs." His voice trailed off as his eyes slid past me, back into the glowing reception hall. Through the terrace doors, I saw Veronica surrounded by her bridesmaids in their champagne-colored dresses that probably cost more than my mortgage. She was laughing, her smile sharp and sure, while my son stood before me, asking for more. She caught my eye and leaned toward her bridesmaids, whispering something that made them giggle behind their polished nails. And in that second, I saw my future as plain as day. I was going to be the ATM mother-in-law, the woman you only call when you need money, who gets invited to holidays, but tucked away by the kitchen or the bathroom. Next time, maybe they'd put me in the actual servants' quarters. "William," I said carefully, "do the Bennetts know I'm paying for your honeymoon?" His face told me the truth before he even opened his mouth. We agreed that was private. Like the condo down payment was private. Like the country club membership was private. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Does Veronica know about your student loans? The ones I'm still helping you with?" His cheeks flushed red. "That's different. That was an investment in my future." "And what is this?" I asked, gesturing toward the glittering ballroom, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're selling your soul just to be accepted into a world that will never see the real you, the real me. He laughed, but it was sharp and hollow, nothing like the warm laugh his father used to have. The real me isn't some small-town doctor, son of a literature professor. Mother, I've outgrown Savannah. The words burned. Have you outgrown decency, too? I shot back before I could stop myself, because the William I raised would never have shoved his own mother beside the kitchen doors, while strangers sat in places of honor. For just a flicker of a second, I saw it, the boy I once knew, the boy who cried at Old Yeller, who used to pick wildflowers for me on random Tuesdays. But the moment vanished as Veronica's voice cut through the night. William, Daddy's looking for you. The photographer wants family portraits. She appeared in the doorway, glowing in her white gown. Her eyes skimmed over me, cool and dismissive. Oh, Martha, I hope you're enjoying the celebration. Immensely, I said, my southern manners stepping in like muscle memory. I've got the best view in the house for all the kitchen choreography. Her smile stayed plastered on, but her eyes turned cold. We had to make some last-minute adjustments. I'm sure a practical woman like yourself understands. Now, William, she said, and my son straightened like a soldier. Yes, darling. Then, quieter, to me, I'll text you the account details. And just like that, they were gone, leaving me alone on the terrace, the weight of 3 decades of motherhood pressing down on me like an anvil. Inside, the father-daughter dance began, but I couldn't bring myself to watch. Instead, I stared out at the dark stretch of Atlantic, thinking about the old writing desk in my study back home. Veronica had called it shabby once, but she didn't know its secret. Hidden inside was my great-grandfather's collection, first editions and manuscripts worth millions, treasures preserved through wars and a depression. I'd never told William. I'd planned to reveal it someday, when he was ready, when he had the right reasons. I thought of that desk now, and smiled to myself. Some treasures aren't meant to be shared until they can truly be valued. And right now, neither William nor his bride could see value in anything that wasn't glittering with social currency. My phone buzzed. A text from William. The bank details for the honeymoon payment. More followed. 3 missed calls, 5 texts. Need to confirm payment tonight. Resort needs it by midnight. Mother, please respond. The last one hit me hardest. Are you trying to embarrass me? Embarrass him. Me. The woman who mortgaged her house to pay for his medical school. The woman who drove 14 hours straight when he failed his first exam. The woman who held him through heartbreak and scraped together enough to give him everything he asked for. Somehow, I was the embarrassment. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, still in my navy dress, the phone heavy in my hand. Outside my window, Newport's historic mansions lined the coast like ghost ships, their lights twinkling against the black ocean. I'd always dreamed of visiting those houses, walking through their grand rooms, imagining the lives inside. Now I sat here, imagining mine and realizing it was time to stop being just the wallet in the shadows. I couldn't believe it. My only child was getting married, and instead of sitting with family, they had tucked me away by the kitchen like some unwanted guest. While I sat there, my phone buzzed. It was William. I picked up before I could change my mind. It's past midnight, I whispered. Where have you been? His voice came through tight and angry. The resort manager is waiting for payment. Veronica's father almost offered to cover it when he overheard. You didn't let him, did you? Of course not, I said quickly. I told him it was taken care of. But it isn't, is it, William? You just assumed I'd pay, like I always do. I got up from the bed and stared out at the lighthouse, sweeping its light across the dark sea. Mother, we discussed this, he argued. You agreed to help with the honeymoon. I agreed to help with the honeymoon, I said, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. Not a 3-week trip costing $93,000, and I certainly didn't agree to be treated like a nobody at your wedding. The silence stretched thin. When he finally spoke again, his voice was softer, almost rehearsed. The seating was unfortunate. Veronica apologized for the mistake. To who? I shot back. Because she never apologized to me. He hesitated. She feels terrible about it. But I knew he was lying. I'd seen Veronica's smirk when she looked at me at that table. I'd seen how she kept me out of the photos on purpose. I'd heard her whispers to her bridesmaids. William, I said quietly, do you remember when you were 16 and wanted those sneakers everyone was wearing? The ones that cost almost $200. Mother, this isn't the time your father and I couldn't afford them. So we told you to earn the money yourself. You spent the whole summer mowing lawns and washing cars. And when you finally bought those shoes, you took such good care of them. You were proud because you knew what they had cost you. What's your point? His voice was rising. My point is that you've forgotten the value of things when they come to isolate. This is about money, he snapped. I'm a surgeon. I'll pay you back when my practice grows. No, William, I said firmly. This isn't about money. It's about respect. You let your bride stick your only living parent by the kitchen doors while strangers sat in the best seats. And worse, you're becoming someone I don't even recognize, someone who only cares about impressing people with big houses and country club memberships. It feels like you're ashamed of where you came from, ashamed of me, and that hurts more than anything. He tried to argue, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. What's not fair, I continued, is expecting me to pay for a lifestyle that shuts me out. So, no, William, I'm not paying for this honeymoon. Not tonight, not tomorrow. The silence after that was heavy. I could even hear the waves crashing against the cliffs. You can't be serious, he whispered. We leave tomorrow. Everything's planned. Then maybe it's time you and Veronica talk about your finances. Or maybe her wealthy friends can help cover the bill. Mother, please. For the first time, I heard panic in his voice. Veronica will be devastated. Her friends have been following the wedding online for months. We'll never get those dates again. I'm sorry, William, I really am. But I've finally realized something. I love you enough to stop enabling behavior that's turning you into someone you were never meant to be. If you do this, he warned, his tone turning cold, don't expect to be part of our lives. The threat should have broken me. Instead, it just proved what I already feared. My son's love was tied to what I could give, not who I was. That would break my heart, I admitted, but keeping things the way they are would break something even deeper. I hung up before he could reply. My hands were shaking, but my mind felt clearer than it had in years. I took off my dress, hung it neatly, changed into my nightgown, and slipped into the hotel's soft sheets. For the first time since arriving in Newport, I felt like myself again. Not William's ATM, not the mother to be hidden away, but Martha Coleman, literature professor, widow of Charles Coleman, guardian of a family's story, and a woman who finally knew her limit. The phone buzzed again and again on the nightstand, but I didn't reach for it. The phone wouldn't stop buzzing. First texts, then emails, then voicemails. William Vench. I didn't read or listen to a single one. I just turned the phone face down. Tomorrow would bring the fallout. My son might yell. He might even cut me off for good. The thought brought tears to my eyes. But I still didn't regret my decision. Sometimes real love meant standing your ground, even when it would be easier to give in. Outside, the lighthouse kept sweeping its beam across the dark sea. It reminded me that even in the blackest night, you sometimes get flashes of clarity. I closed my eyes and thought of home, my old Savannah house with its hidden treasures, the garden Charles had cared for, the life I had built, a life worth more than the Bennetts and their shallow world could ever measure. The knock came at 7:15 a.m., 3 sharp raps that cut through my restless sleep like gunshots. I sat up, disoriented, blinking at the glowing red clock. Then another round of knocking. Martha, I know you're in there. It was Veronica. Her voice sounded shrill, stripped of its polite social coating. I slipped on the hotel robe over my nightgown, smoothed my silver hair, and opened the door. There she was in a cream-colored St. John suit, clearly her honeymoon travel outfit. Her hair was pulled into a perfect chignon, her makeup flawless, but her mouth was tight and her eyes were blazing. May I come in? She asked, though she didn't wait for permission. She swept past me, leaving a trail of expensive French perfume behind her. Good morning, Veronica, I said, closing the door. And congratulations again on your beautiful wedding. Her head snapped toward me, nostrils flaring. Don't play the sweet Southern lady with me. William told me what you're doing. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtains. Morning sunlight flooded the room, lighting up the Newport coastline. The ocean sparkled in that particular shade of blue Charles would have called heartbreaking. And what exactly am I doing? I asked. Withholding the honeymoon money, she spat. Trying to ruin the most important trip of our lives, because you didn't like your table at the reception. I studied her carefully. She was beautiful, yes, polished, perfect, but also blind to her own cruelty. Strangely, I felt a flicker of pity. The table was just a symptom, Veronica, not the cause, I said. I motioned for her to sit, but she stayed standing, arms crossed tightly. I've been enabling behavior that isn't healthy for William, or for your marriage. Enabling, She laughed, sharp and humorless. You mean controlling? William warned me you might try something like this. Her rewriting of the truth should have angered me. Instead, it only made things clearer. What exactly has William told you about our family's finances? I asked. She tossed her head. That you're comfortable, that your house in Savannah is paid off, that you have retirement savings, and that you promised to pay for the honeymoon months ago. Did he also mention, I said gently, that I remortgaged that house to put him through medical school, or that I've already put over $150,000 into this wedding? Her flawless expression faltered. What are you talking about? The vintage champagne, the custom gown, the Paris photographer, the string quartet. I ticked them off on my fingers. William came to me privately about each one, said he couldn't bear to disappoint you, but he couldn't afford it himself. Her body seemed to deflate. She sank down onto the bed, her cream suit wrinkling. That's not possible. William makes an excellent salary, and the wedding was, she stopped, paid for by your parents. I finished, some of it, yes, but not most of it. Confusion clouded her face. But he told Daddy he was covering his share. That's why Daddy respected him, because he insisted on paying. William has always had pride, I said softly, but lately, he's been writing checks his bank account can't cover. I sat across from her. Did you know he's still paying off student loans? That he remortgaged his condo to buy your engagement ring? Her masquerade eyes widened. She stared at me, disbelief written across her perfect face. Why would he do that? Veronica asked, her voice cracking. If he couldn't afford these things, he should have just said so. My family has more than enough. Exactly, I said softly. Your family has more than enough. But William felt he had to compete with that, to prove he was worthy of you and your world. Her eyes dropped to the diamond band on her finger. She twisted it nervously. So what? This is some kind of budgeting lesson, withholding the honeymoon money to teach us a point. No, I leaned forward, my voice calm but steady. This isn't about budgeting. It's about honesty, about respect. You deliberately put me by the kitchen doors, away from the important moments at my only child's wedding. Color rose in her cheeks. It wasn't personal. The Andersons are close friends. Senator Mitchell donates to Daddy's foundation. They needed those seats more than the mother of the groom deserved to see her son's first dance, to be in family photos. I shook my head slowly. You made a choice about my value in William's life. I'm just responding to the message you sent. Her embarrassment hardened into anger. So, this is revenge. This is consequence, I corrected gently. In my family, we believe actions show truth. Your actions told me where I stand. Why would I fund a honeymoon for people who couldn't even find a place for me at their table? She shot to her feet, pacing, her voice rising. We leave in 7 hours. The seaplane transfer is non-refundable. The villa is ready. Our friends know the itinerary. Do you have any idea how humiliating it will be to cancel? About as humiliating as being the only mother seated by the kitchen. Perhaps, I said mildly. Her eyes blazed as she spun back toward me. What do you want? An apology. Fine. I'm sorry about the stupid table. It was thoughtless. Now, will you transfer the money? The words fell between us like coins on a counter. Empty, transactional, not real remorse. I don't want a fake apology, I said carefully. What I want is for my son to remember who he really is, and for you to see him too. The real William, not the one you've tried to reshape to fit into your world. You don't know how I see him, she snapped. I know you've never asked about his childhood, never wanted to see family photos, never once asked about his father, who would have loved to be here today. I stood, tightening the robe around me. The William you married is hurting himself financially to keep up appearances for your benefit. Tears shimmered in her eyes, smudging her perfect mascara. You're just a bitter old woman who can't handle her son moving up in the world. The insult should have stung, but it didn't. My voice stayed calm. Or maybe I'm a mother who sees her son making the same mistake his father once made. She froze. What mistake? Believing love had to be proven with money and sacrifice. I walked to my purse, pulled out an old photograph, and handed it to her. Charles and I, sitting on the porch swing in Savannah, laughing at some forgotten joke. Simple, real. Charles nearly bankrupted us, trying to give me the life he thought I deserved. I explained. It nearly destroyed our marriage until he realized Di hadn't married his wallet. For a moment, something cracked in her polished expression, a flicker of doubt, then it was gone. William loves you, I said softly, but the question is, do you love him? The real man, not the surgeon with the country club tie and Manhattan connections, because that man is drowning, trying to be someone he's not. She handed back the photo, her face unreadable again. I'll tell William you're still refusing the funds. I am, I said firmly. Her hand was on the doorknob when she paused. Without turning, she said quietly, for what it's worth, the table wasn't my idea. It was my mother's. She said it would help William cut ties with his provincial past. The door closed with a soft click, leaving me alone with the morning light and the weight of words unsaid. Later, in the hotel's dining room overlooking the harbor, I sipped my tea and picked at a muffin, watching wealthy tourists stroll along the docks. My flight home to Savannah wasn't until late afternoon, which gave me hours to sit with the wreckage of the past 24 hours. I hadn't heard from William since Veronica's visit, and the silence felt heavy, like something bad was bound to happen. I looked up from my table and saw Robert Bennett, Veronica's father, standing there, dressed in a sharp navy blazer with shiny gold buttons and crisp white pants. He looked every bit the part of old, inherited wealth. Mr. Bennett, I said politely, straightening up without even thinking. Good morning. May I join you? He asked, but before I could answer, he waved over a waiter. Coffee, black, and for the lady just refill her tea. He sat across from me like he owned the place. His silver hair was perfectly cut, his skin tan and smooth for a man in his 60s. Only his eyes gave him away, sharp and calculating, always sizing people up. Beautiful day, he said, glancing toward the water. Newport in spring, nothing like it. Yes, it is, I answered, though my mind raced. Was he here to pressure me about the honeymoon money, or to threaten me? When the drinks arrived, he leaned in. I understand there's been some confusion about the honeymoon arrangements. Not confusion, I corrected, just a change of plans. He nodded slowly, like that confirmed what he already knew. Then, almost casually, he dropped a bomb. When William first asked to marry my daughter, I had him investigated. It shouldn't have shocked me. The Bennetts would absolutely check into anyone entering their family, but it still made my stomach tighten. He went on smoothly. Assets, debts, connections, possible scandals. We like to know what we're getting into. And what did you find? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Robert's gaze didn't waver. A skilled young surgeon, yes, but one drowning in debt. A man spending too much to impress my daughter. A man who relied on his mother's money while keeping her at a distance. His words stung because they were true. You make him sound calculating. Not calculating, Robert corrected, his voice cutting. Desperate to fit into a world that demands appearances and connections. A world my wife and daughter play hard in. I'm afraid. That honesty caught me off guard. Yet you allowed the marriage. I did, he said, looking back at the harbor, because under the suits and the ambition, I saw a young man who reminded me of myself 40 years ago, not just in love with a woman but with the life she represented. That admission made me look at him differently. And what about you, Mr. Bennett? Where did you come from before all this? I gestured at his expensive clothes and effortless air of privilege. A faint smile touched his lips. Coal miner's son, Weston, Pennsylvania, scholarship to Princeton. Married Elizabeth, her family had the pedigree. I made the money. Together, we built the empire. For the first time, I saw him not as a polished figure but as someone who had clawed his way up. He went on, his voice quieter now. But empires have costs. My wife and daughter live in a world where appearances rule, and kindness looks like weakness. I built that world for them, and now I find it hollow. Why are you telling me this? I asked. He sighed, suddenly looking older. Because I saw the look on your face at the reception, a parent watching their child make choices for the wrong reasons. When I learned William was secretly asking you to cover parts of the wedding while lying to us about it, I knew exactly what he was doing. He was trading his integrity for entry into our world, just like I once did. I set my teacup down, realizing we were no longer on opposite sides but sitting in quiet agreement. Then you understand why I had to stop enabling it. I do, Robert said firmly. Though Veronica and Elizabeth aren't happy, the honeymoon is cancelled. William is facing questions about his finances. My wife is even reconsidering certain wedding gifts. His tone carried no surprise, only wariness. I regret the disruption, he said, but not the decision. I hadn't even finished my tea when Robert slipped an envelope out of his blazer and set it on the table between us. William should have been honest, he said quietly, with Veronica, with you, with himself. I stared at the envelope like it might bite. What's this? Information your son may find useful, Robert said, pushing it closer. About my wife's past. About financial arrangements William doesn't know exist. My hand hovered over it. Why would you give this to me? His expression grew serious. Because, unlike my wife and daughter, I haven't forgotten where I came from or what really matters. And because I see in you someone who values truth over appearances. That's rare in our world. He stood, smoothing his jacket, and dropped a few bills on the table, though we both knew the meal would go on his hotel tab. Before leaving, he paused. One more thing. Your historic home in Savannah. William mentioned it was built by an academic in the 1890s. Was that your great-grandfather? Yes, I said slowly, confused. Edward Coleman. He was a literature professor and collector. Something flickered in his eyes, almost like respect. I thought so. The Coleman collection is well known in certain circles. My breath caught. Very few people knew about my great-grandfather's library. You've heard of it. I sit on the board at the Morgan Library, he explained, smiling faintly. When William described your house, I wondered if it was that Coleman home, the one rumored to hold first editions of Whitman, Thoreau, Melville. For the first time since I'd arrived in Newport, I felt steady again. William has no idea, does he? None, Robert said with quiet satisfaction. Nor does my daughter, who, if I recall, called your house shabby after her visit. She did, I admitted, and this time I smiled too. Perhaps they both still have lessons to learn about real value, he said. With a polite nod, he added, safe travels back to Savannah. Mrs. Coleman, I suspect we'll be speaking again. When he left, I opened the envelope. Inside were bank records and a prenuptial agreement that heavily favored Veronica. There was also proof of a secret trust fund Robert's wife had set up. Money William would only see if he hit certain career and social milestones. They had been measuring my son's worth with the same cold calculation he'd used to impress them. Strangely, I didn't feel angry. Instead, a calm washed over me. Outside the window, the morning sun lit up the harbor. Ships once carried priceless cargo from these docks. Today, another kind of trade had happened, truth for truth, with my son's happiness as the stake. The waiter poured me fresh tea. Anything else, ma'am? No, thank you, I said, gazing at the glittering water. I have everything I need. I chose to drive back to Savannah instead of flying. 14 hours on the open road felt better than being trapped on a plane with my thoughts. The rental company gave me a plain sedan, nothing fancy, but solid and dependable, like me. 3 hours into the drive, somewhere in New Jersey, my phone rang through the car's speakers. William's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and pressed the button. Hello, William. Silence stretched before he finally asked, where are you? On the road. I decided to drive home. Another pause. We didn't get to say goodbye. His voice carried a quiet accusation that made me grip the wheel tighter. You've been busy, I said carefully. Busy dealing with the mess you created. His tone sharpened. Do you have any idea what you've done? I moved into the passing lane, buying time. I made a hard decision, one I believe was necessary. Necessary. He gave a bitter laugh. Veronica's friends have been texting her all day. Her sister posted about the villa online yesterday. Now everyone knows the honeymoon's cancelled. She's humiliated. I'm sorry for her embarrassment, I said, choosing my words. But maybe this is the moment to be honest about your finances. That's rich coming from you. His voice dripped with anger. What do you mean? I asked, caught off guard. I met with Robert Bennett this morning, William snapped. He had a lot to say about the Coleman family. My heart jumped. I hadn't expected Robert to talk to William so quickly. Did he? The Coleman collection, William said, his voice sharp with accusation. First editions worth millions. Manuscripts, museums, would kill for all, sitting in that little house you live in. And while I worked myself to the bone to build a career, I pulled off at the next exit, into a rest stop. This wasn't the kind of talk I could have while driving. I parked, shut off the engine, and let the first raindrops hit the windshield. William, I never hid anything from you. You just never asked. You made yourself out to be this humble teacher who sacrificed everything for me. His voice rose, sharp with anger. All those guilt trips about remortgaging the house for my education. When that house is filled with books worth enough to buy a hospital. I watched the rain fall harder, streaking the glass. The collection was never meant to be sold. It's a legacy, something to be protected. Your great-great-grandfather spent his life building it. A legacy you never shared with me, he shot back. But underneath the anger, I could hear hurt. Your own son. I was waiting for the right time, I said softly. For the moment you showed interest in our family history for something beyond what money it might bring. That's not fair, he muttered. Isn't it? I asked gently. When was the last time you asked about my life, about your father's research, about our family except when it connected to something you needed right then? His silence told me everything. I always meant to share it with you, I continued, but over the years, you made it clear that Savannah, our home, our history, they embarrassed you. You treated them like burdens, not treasures. His voice cracked with disbelief. So what? This was some kind of test. Letting me struggle financially while you sat on a fortune? No, I said firmly. It was me holding on to the hope that one day you'd remember what truly matters. I sighed. The sound heavy in the quiet car. The same hope Robert Bennett has for his daughter. At that, William's tone turned bitter. He showed me the prenup. Did you know about it too? I only learned this morning. I hesitated. But William, why did you lie to the Bennetts about paying for the wedding yourself? The silence was thick until finally, his voice shifted less harsh, suddenly fragile, almost boyish. Because Robert Bennett built his empire from nothing. Coal miner's son, Princeton, a legend. How could I admit that I needed my mother's help just to afford the life his daughter wanted? What kind of man would that make me in his eyes? The irony almost made me laugh. It would make you exactly the kind of man he is, William. A man who knows money isn't the true measure of worth. Rain hammered the roof, wrapping us in a cocoon of white noise. Veronica's devastated about the honeymoon, he admitted at last. She thinks you cancelled it to punish her. And what do you think? I asked quietly. A long sigh. I think I've been so busy trying to belong in her world that I forgot to ask if it's even a world worth belonging to. Something fragile stirred in me, like a butterfly opening its wings. And now everything's a mess, he continued. Her mother is questioning the marriage. Veronica keeps swinging between tears and rage, and I'm standing in the middle, wondering how I got here. One compromise at a time, I said gently. One little sacrifice of your true self after another. This silence felt different, no longer defensive, but thoughtful. After a while, he asked quietly, do you remember that summer in the Outer Banks? When I was 12, the memory startled me. Of course, your father was researching his book on coastal dialects. We rented that little blue cottage by the beach, and we couldn't afford fancy restaurants, William said, his voice softening. So Dad grilled fish every night on that old charcoal grill, and I brought paperbacks, I added, smiling despite myself. Melville, Conrad, Stevenson. We read them aloud on the porch. Dad did all the voices. William chuckled faintly. Then his voice turned serious. That was the happiest I can ever remember us being. His words carried such weight. No pretensions, I agreed. No keeping up appearances. Just us. Rain streamed down, blurring the outside world, as if washing everything clean. We were happy, William, I whispered. Not because of what we had, but because of who we were together. He was quiet. Then confessed, I don't think Veronica understands that kind of happiness. Last night, after you refused the money, she said we could fake it, that we could book rooms at fancy hotels nearby, take pictures, and pretend on Instagram we were in the Maldives. No one would know the difference. The lie stunned me. And what did you say? I told her I was tired of pretending. His voice cracked. I don't think she's ever heard me say no before. We sat in silence again, the rain tapping gently on the roof like a drumbeat. Finally, William spoke once more. The honeymoon wasn't just delayed, it was completely called off. I see, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice calm, while I waited for him to go on. William told me he had asked Veronica for space, that he needed time to figure out what in his life was real and what was just for show. He sounded tired, but also more clear-headed than he had in a long time. I'm going to stay with Marcus for a few days, he said. Marcus, his old friend from medical school, the one I remembered he used to play basketball with. Now he's chief resident at Boston General, living in a tiny apartment, driving a beat-up Honda. William sounded surprised. I remembered him. I reminded him that I once sent Marcus a care package when he was studying for his board exams, cookies and coffee on. How he'd written me the kindest thank you note. He once told William I was the mom he wished he'd had. William admitted he hadn't seen Marcus much lately, mostly because Veronica thought Marcus was too ordinary. The word hung heavy between us, but this time, instead of sounding small, ordinary felt like a hidden strength. Well, I said carefully, ordinary isn't such a bad thing. William took a deep breath. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. My chest tightened. Go ahead, I said. All the times you helped me financially, paying tuition, the condo down payment, the wedding, did it hurt you? Were you putting your own security at risk? Tears filled my eyes. No, William, I never touched the Coleman collection. I used my savings and your father's life insurance. I was careful, but I was never in danger. Yes, there was a small remortgage, but that's long since paid off. I smiled, even though he couldn't see me. Sometimes I may have made it sound worse than it really was. Especially when you were making choices I didn't think were wise. He laughed, surprised, and for the first time in ages it sounded real. So manipulative, he teased. Strategic, I corrected, smiling myself. That's a mother's privilege. The rain outside started to ease, and patches of sunlight broke through. I don't know what happens next, William admitted. With Veronica, with the Bennetts, with any of it. I told him he didn't need to know everything right now. Just promise me one thing, I added. What's that? He asked. That whatever choice you make, it'll be the real you, not the version you thought Veronica and her world wanted. I'll try, he whispered. His voice sounded both lost and found at the same time. Drive safe, Mom. And thank you for not giving up on me. When the call ended, I sat quietly, watching the last of the rain clear. A rainbow stretched across the highway ahead. For the first time since arriving in Newport, I felt like I was on the right road again. When I finally pulled into Savannah, dawn was breaking. My Victorian house, standing tall on a moss-covered street, greeted me with its familiar creaks and sighs as I unlocked the door. After the grandeur of Newport and all the emotional storms, being home felt like a warm hug. I set my bags down and walked through the rooms, brushing my hands over the old bookshelves. Behind a hidden panel in my antique desk, dismissed by Veronica as shabby, was the heart of the Coleman collection. Priceless first editions and original manuscripts from great writers, letters between literary giants of the 1800s. My great-grandfather had built that collection piece by piece, not for money but for love of ideas. It had always been meant for safekeeping, not selling. I'd always imagined William would inherit it one day. I brewed myself a cup of tea in the kitchen. Charles had modernized before he passed, knowing how much I loved to cook. Just as the kettle finished whistling, the phone rang. The number wasn't William's. Hello, Mrs. Coleman. This is Vanessa Bennett. I almost dropped my mug. Veronica's sister. Her voice was lower than Veronica's, less polished, more real. I hope you don't mind me calling. Father gave me your number. I carried my tea to the porch swing, Charles's old favorite spot for Sunday mornings. Not at all, Vanessa. What can I do for you? She paused. I wanted to apologize. Vanessa's honesty caught me off guard. I was shocked by how my family behaved at the wedding, she admitted. The seating arrangement especially, it was cruel and deliberate. I should have said something. As she spoke, I watched a bright red cardinal land on the bird feeder outside my oak tree. Its feathers glowed against the green leaves. You weren't responsible for the seating chart, I said gently. No, but I saw what was happening, and I stayed quiet, she confessed, her voice heavy with regret. My mother and Veronica can be, well, let's just say there's a reason. I live all the way in Seattle and visit as little as possible. Her bluntness surprised me. A Bennett speaking so openly about the Bennetts, that was new. I appreciate your call, Vanessa, I said, but I'm curious why now. She sighed. Father told me what happened with the honeymoon, and about your conversation with William. He said you were a woman of substance, and that we treated you unfairly. Robert Bennett never stopped surprising me. That was generous of him, I said. Father has always been the only one of us with both money and perspective, Vanessa replied with a mix of love and wry humor. The rest of us usually have one or the other, but rarely both. I couldn't help but smile. And which category do you fall into? Perspective, she answered quickly. I teach middle school, public school, not private. My mother nearly fainted when I chose teaching over finance. The mental image of Elizabeth Bennet horrified at her daughter. Becoming just a teacher made me laugh. It's honorable work, I told her. It's real work, she shot back, which is more than I can say for much of what my mother and Veronica spend their time on. She paused for a moment. William called me last night. My heart skipped. He did? Yes. He asked about Marcus Reynolds. Wondered if I remembered him from college. Marcus was the kindest one in his medical school group. He organized study sessions, made sure everyone ate during finals. Veronica always called him the charity case because he was on scholarship. Her voice tightened. That was her cruelty, not his. I felt my chest ache. William mentioned he might stay with Marcus for a while. He is, Vanessa said. They're having breakfast together right now. William sounded different, more like himself, before Veronica. He even asked me about my students, my life in Seattle. Real questions, not small talk. I closed my eyes, feeling the porch swing gently rocking beneath me. That sounds like my son. Mrs. Coleman, she hesitated. Martha, I corrected softly. Martha, she repeated, gathering her thoughts. What you did, refusing to pay for that ridiculous honeymoon, it was the right thing. Painful, but right. For years I've watched my mother and Veronica treat people like accessories, only valuing them for how they made the family look, and William was their perfect accessory, I said quietly. Handsome, accomplished, presentable. Exactly, she said, her voice full of real concern. They were shaping him into the son-in-law they wanted, and he was letting them. I almost didn't come to the wedding because I couldn't stand to see it. Then when you saw how they treated me, I said, it was illuminating. It was unforgivable, she said firmly. Which is why I've decided to stay in Newport a little longer. Father and I are having dinner with William tomorrow. My mother and Veronica are furious. But I don't care. The thought of Vanessa and Robert sitting with William gave me a sudden, unexpected rush of hope. Families are messy, especially ones built on appearances instead of love. Father mentioned your collection, Vanessa added. The books and manuscripts. I blinked. He did his research. He respects what it represents, she said, a family's long-term devotion to something meaningful. I think he sees in you the path he didn't take, the values he set aside to build his empire. Her insights struck me deeply. Your father is more complicated than he seems. We all are, she replied. That's why I'm cautiously hopeful about William. Beneath all that polish, I think the real him is still there, the thoughtful man who remembers what matters. We talked a few minutes longer, traded phone numbers, and promised to stay in touch. When we hung up, I stayed on the porch swing, watching the morning light filter through the Spanish moss-like lace. Just 3 days ago at the wedding, I'd felt invisible, pushed to the sidelines, useful only for my checkbook. But now, from the very family I had once seen as enemies, I had found unexpected allies. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from Vanessa. William's having breakfast with Marcus, talking about real things again for the first time in ages. We'll call later. Just 3 words, but they carried so much hope that my eyes filled with tears. I typed back quickly, love you. Take all the time you need. At the feeder outside, the bright red cardinal was joined by its mate. The 2 birds shared the seeds gently, each waiting its turn. Watching them, I thought how rare it was to see such quiet balance. The doorbell rang, breaking the moment. When I opened it, a delivery man stood holding an enormous vase filled with white lilies and blue hydrangeas. Martha Coleman? He asked. Yes, that's me. I carried the flowers to the kitchen table, the real table. Not the one Veronica had banished me to at the wedding, but the one where my family had gathered for decades. Homework, meals, late-night talks, it all happened there. I opened the card tucked inside, from one who understands the value of substance over appearance. With respect and gratitude for your courage, Robert Bennett. I set the flowers down. The morning light streamed in, making the white lilies glow as if lit from within. My house felt alive again, not shabby or small like Veronica had once said, but rich with memories. The old hallway clock, a wedding gift to my great-grandparents, struck 9 times. Life was waiting for me, classes to plan, a garden to tend, friends to see. But first, I went to my desk and pulled out the leather-bound journal Charles had given me on our last anniversary before his heart gave out. I'd saved it for something important. On the first blank page, I began to write, Dear William, when you're ready, I want to tell you stories about your great-grandfather and his love for the books he collected, about your father and the man he truly was, about our family's choice to value meaning over appearances. This inheritance isn't about money or status. It's about courage, about living truthfully in a world that often rewards the opposite. The kitchen table will always be waiting for you, not as punishment or exile, but as the center of our family, where dreams and wounds have been shared for generations. Take the time you need to find yourself. I'll be here when you're ready. With all my love, Mom. 2 weeks passed. Spring bloomed across Savannah, jasmine scenting the air, azaleas blazing in every garden. My days found their rhythm again, teaching literature, tending the roses, meeting friends for book club. Life settled, though William stayed close in my thoughts. We spoke every few days, short calls, careful ones, as if we were both relearning how to talk without the heavy weight of money or expectations between us. He was still in Boston with Marcus, still sorting things out. Veronica had gone back to Manhattan, living with her parents while they decided what to do next. Vanessa called sometimes, sharing small updates. Her mother was furious about the cancelled honeymoon and blamed me, calling it interference. But Robert had defended me for once, standing up to his wife. which Vanessa said sparked the most honest fight their marriage had seen in 20 years. One warm afternoon, I was out pruning roses when a black town car pulled up. The driver stepped out, polished and formal, opening the rear door. When Veronica Benetto, I wasn't sure whether she was still calling herself Coleman, stepped onto the sidewalk, I nearly dropped my shears. She looked the same, yet different. The designer clothes and flawless makeup were there, but her shoulders seemed softer, less stiff, almost uncertain. "Mrs. Coleman," she called, "may I speak with you?" I pulled off my gardening gloves, aware of the dirt under my nails and the sweat on my cotton shirt. "This is unexpected, Veronica, for me as well." Her eyes flicked toward my house, taking in the porch painted haint blue in the old Gula tradition, the gingerbread trim, the century-old oaks. "Your house is lovely." The words seemed to cost her effort. I nodded toward the porch. "Would you like some tea? It's warm out here." She followed me inside, her Louboutins clicking sharply against the heart pine floors Charles had spent one whole summer restoring by hand. I could feel her eyes on everything: the antique chairs, the shelves packed with books, the little signs of age that come with an old house no matter how much you care for it. "Please, sit," I said, motioning to the porch where I'd set out a pitcher of sweet tea earlier that morning. "I'll just wash up." When I came back with clean hands and another glass, Veronica was standing at the railing, staring at the garden. "The colors are extraordinary," she said. "I planted most of it myself," I told her. "The roses were my husband's project. I've kept them going since he passed." I poured the tea over ice, the glasses sweating in the heavy air. "So what brings you to Savannah, Veronica? I thought you'd be in Manhattan with your family." She sipped the glass, but only traced a finger along the condensation instead of drinking. "William asked for an annulment." The words dropped between us like a stone in still water. "I see," I said quietly. "He told me our marriage was built on mutual deception, that we fell in love with images, not with each other. He said he needs to find himself again before he can be with anyone." Her voice was steady, almost too steady. I sipped my tea, weighing my words. "And how do you feel about that?" Her eyes met mine, uncertain, angry, humiliated, relieved. "I'm not even sure which one is real." Her honesty startled me. "That sounds complicated," I said gently. "It is." She set her glass down and reached into her handbag a Birkin. "That probably cost more than a semester of college tuition." From it, she pulled out a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "I came to return this. It belongs with your family." Puzzled, I unwrapped it. My breath caught. It was a leather-bound first edition of Walden, part of the Coleman collection. "Where did you get this?" I whispered, running my fingers over the delicate cover. "William gave it to me as a wedding gift," she said, watching my reaction closely. "He told me it was a family heirloom, that it shaped the Coleman way of thinking for generations." I opened the book and saw my great-grandfather's inscription in his neat, careful handwriting. "In wildness is the preservation of the world, and in simplicity the salvation of the soul." "Did you read it?" I asked softly. "I tried," she admitted, her voice carrying a rare trace of regret. "But I couldn't understand why anyone would choose the woods over comfort. I pretended to love it, of course, and placed it on the bookshelf where William's colleagues would notice it." Her blunt confession could have angered me, but instead, I felt only pity for this young woman who valued appearances more than connections. "Why bring it back now?" She looked around the porch at the worn wicker chairs, the slow-turning ceiling fan, the garden beyond. "Because I understand its value now, even if not its message. This," she gestured at my home, "my life. This is what William was trying to show me, a life built on substance instead of show." I placed the book carefully on the small table between us. "And what do you see, Veronica?" She stood straighter, slipping back into her polished demeanor. "I see that I was cruel to you at the wedding, that I let my mother's snobbery guide me, and I disrespected someone who deserved better. I see that I've spent my whole life chasing approval from people who measure worth by the wrong standards." "That's quite an insight," I said. Her old sharpness flickered back. "Don't misunderstand me, Mrs. Coleman. I'm not renouncing my life. I still love beautiful things. I like moving in certain circles. I'm not about to start shopping at Target or driving a Honda." "I wouldn't expect you to," I said calmly. "But," she went on, her voice softening again, "I know I crossed a line with you, and that was on me, not you. I'm sorry." The apology hung between us, fragile but real. I nodded, choosing not to push it further. "William also asked me to give you this." She pulled an envelope from her bag and handed it to me. "He said he isn't ready to bring it himself yet, but it was important you receive it." I held the envelope, its weight suggesting more than just a letter inside. "Thank you," I said. Veronica stood, smoothing her dress, in a gesture I now recognized not as vanity but as self-soothing. "I should go. My flight leaves in 2 hours. You came all this way just to return a book and deliver a letter?" I asked. A faint smile tugged at her lips, and to see the famous Coleman house for myself, to understand what William was trying to explain about heritage and value. She glanced around once more, taking it all in. "It really is beautiful here," Veronica said, glancing around once more. "Not the kind of life I'd ever choose, but I understand now why it matters to your family." I walked her to the door, remembering how she'd once placed me at the far end of the kitchen during her wedding. Now here she was in my foyer, looking at me with something like respect. "What will you do now?" I asked as we stepped onto the front porch. She thought for a moment. "Reassess. My father wants me to take a real role in the foundation, not just lend my name to it." William said something that stuck with me, that I've never actually earned anything myself. "That sounds like my son," I said softly. "The real one." She nodded. "The man I sometimes caught glimpses of but never truly understood." She slipped on her sunglasses and held out her hand formally. "Thank you for seeing me, Mrs. Coleman. I hope William finds what he's looking for." I shook her hand, noticing the perfect manicure and the diamond wedding band she still wore. "So do I, Veronica, and I hope the same for you." After her car disappeared down the road, I returned to the porch and opened William's envelope. Inside was a short letter and a small velvet pouch. "Mom, I found this in Dad's old tackle box when I was digging through the attic last Christmas. I think he meant it for you, but never got the chance to give it. It feels right that you should have it now. I'm not ready to come home yet, but I'm slowly finding my way back to myself. Marcus keeps me grounded, and surprisingly, so does Vanessa Bennett. She's nothing like her mother or sister. The annulment papers are filed. Veronica didn't fight it. I think she's trying to figure herself out too. I miss you. I miss Dad. I miss the person I was before I lost my way. Love, William." My hands trembled as I opened the velvet pouch. Inside was a small silver compass, clearly old, with words engraved on the back. "For Martha, who always helps me find my way home. Love, Charles." I held it tightly, feeling the weight of both the metal and the meaning. Charles must have bought it before his final heart attack, tucking it away for a moment that never came. Yet somehow, through our son, it had found its way to me. A son who, at last, was learning to follow his own true north instead of chasing illusions. I slipped the compass into my pocket and went back to the garden, pruning the roses Charles had planted years ago. Each cut felt like an act of hope, removing what was dead or overgrown, so that new life could bloom, just like William was doing, just like I had done when I refused to pay for that honeymoon. Sometimes the deepest love requires the sharpest cuts. As I worked among the roses, I thought about how the most important tables in our lives aren't the ones at fancy receptions, but the kitchen tables. The ones where we sit with people who truly see us. The sweltering summer eased into autumn, and the savannah air turned golden and crisp. My college classes kept me busy, guiding another round of students through Thoreau and Emerson, watching them ask new questions of old words, the very reason I'd chosen teaching in the first place. William and I spoke often now, our conversations real instead of stiff. He stayed in Boston, choosing a job at a community hospital over the high-paying private practice he'd once chased. "Less money, more medicine," he explained, "helping people who actually need it, not vanity cases." By August, the annulment was finalized, a quiet legal end to a marriage that had begun with so much show. Veronica returned to Manhattan, but from what Vanessa told me, she and I had grown unexpectedly close. Veronica had thrown herself into her father's foundation work. To everyone's surprise, she was good at it, genuinely interested in the programs. And as for William and Vanessa, something was blooming there, though they wouldn't admit it. Coffee dates turned into dinners, dinners into long afternoons at museums and parks. "Just friends," William insisted whenever I asked. But I knew that tone. It was the same careful hope Charles had shown when we first started dating. One crisp October afternoon, as I graded papers on the porch swing, my phone rang. Robert Bennett's name flashed on the screen. "Martha," he greeted me warmly. "How are you enjoying this magnificent fall?" "It's lovely," I said with a smile. "Though I suppose New England has us beat this time of year." I set aside a student's essay. "And how are things in your world, Robert?" Over the past month since the wedding, he and I had built the unlikeliest of friendships, talking every few weeks about books, education, and now and then, about our children. Robert had once told me he was a big fan of American transcendentalist writers, the same thinkers who had inspired my great-grandfather to build the Coleman collection in the first place. Business is still busy. The empire keeps growing, he joked, though there was a tiredness in his laugh. But I'm calling for a personal reason. I'll be in Charleston next week for a conference and thought I might drive down to Savannah afterward. Would you be willing to show me the Coleman collection? Ever since our first talk, I've been curious. His request caught me off guard. You'd drive all the way to Savannah just to look at a few old books. Old books, he chuckled. Martha, I once flew all the way to Dublin just to see a first edition of Ulysses. Trust me, collectors like me are nothing if not devoted to our obsessions. I smiled, recognizing a kindred spirit even if our lives looked very different on the outside. In that case, I'd be honored to show you. When should I expect you? We agreed on the following Thursday. After we hung up, I wandered through my house, noticing things I usually overlooked: the shelves of carefully preserved books, the clock that chimed in the hallway, the layers of family history resting in each room. For the first time in a long while, I felt proud not just of what these things meant to me, but of what they might mean to someone else. 3 nights later, the doorbell rang just after 9. It was an odd time for a visitor in Savannah, where people generally respected evening quiet. Curious, I opened the door and nearly dropped the book in my hands. William stood there on the porch, a duffel bag at his feet, uncertainty written all over his face. Hi, Mom, he said softly. Is that kitchen table seat still available? I pulled him into a fierce hug, holding on to the shape of him, my son, my only child. The living reminder of Charles and all the Colemans before us. Always, I whispered, always. Later, after settling him into his old room and pulling a peach cobbler from the oven, a small miracle of timing, we sat at the oak kitchen table. Its surface still bore scratches and marks from decades of meals, homework, and late-night talks. It feels strange being back, William admitted, glancing around the kitchen Charles had renovated long ago. A space that still carried its old charm. Everything looks the same. I'm the one who's different. That's how coming home works, I told him, serving a generous slice of cobbler. The house stays the same, and we measure our growth against it. He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. I hadn't seen that in years, not since before Rachel. So, I asked, savoring the moment, what brings you home? Not that you need a reason. He set down his fork after another bite. Several things, actually. First, I've accepted a position at Memorial Hospital here in Savannah. I start in January. Joy rushed through me, though I tried to keep calm. That's wonderful news. But I thought you were happy at the community hospital in Boston. I still am, he said. But Savannah needs doctors too. And he hesitated. I realized I miss home. Not just the idea of it, but the real thing. The place I've been running from. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I'm glad, William, but are you sure? BAFTA has become important to you. A blush rose on his cheeks. Well, that's the second part. Vanessa applied for teaching jobs here in Chatham County. She wants to be closer to her father since he's talking about retiring. I see, I said carefully, though I couldn't stop my smile. And her move might have something to do with your decision. We're exploring possibilities, he admitted, his face warming even more. She's nothing like Veronica, Mom. Vanessa reads actual books, volunteers at a literacy program, and drives a beat-up old Subaru without caring what anyone thinks. She's real. She sees me the real me, not the person I was pretending to be. She sounds wonderful, I said sincerely, and very different from your usual type. William laughed. My usual type nearly bankrupted me financially and morally. His face grew serious again. Vanessa, she reminds me of you, actually. Strong values, no patience for pretense. Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them away. High praise indeed. His expression turned thoughtful. There's one more reason I'm here. Robert Bennett called me yesterday. He said he's coming to Savannah to see the Coleman collection. Yes, we arranged that a few days ago, I said, studying his face. Does that bother you? William hesitated, searching for the right words. I realized that I'd never really valued our family's book collection. For years, I was too busy chasing new things and trying to impress people, while ignoring the incredible history sitting right in front of me. That realization, earned through so many hard months, filled me with quiet pride. The collection had always been waiting for me to be ready. That's just it, Mom, William said, leaning in, his eyes full of honesty. I want to understand it now, not just as old books worth money, but as part of who we are. I want to know what they meant to great-grandfather Coleman, to Dad, To you, I want to be worthy of keeping them safe for the next generation. My heart swelled. Here was my son, not only coming back to his childhood home, but also reconnecting with the values and legacy that made us who we are. Then he pulled a small blue box from his pocket and slid it across the table. I need your advice, he said. Inside was a delicate antique ringa, sapphire surrounded by tiny pearls in a simple gold band, nothing like the flashy diamond he had once given Veronica. It was Grandma Coleman's. Dad gave it to me before he died. He told me to save it for the woman I truly loved. But do you think Vanessa might want something more modern, something bigger? His voice cracked with uncertainty. I closed the box gently and pushed it back toward him. The woman who drives a 10-year-old Subaru and spends her evenings reading real books will understand exactly what this ring means. Relief washed over his face. That's what I hoped you'd say. We sat at the kitchen table long into the night, talking like we hadn't in years. William opened up about the hard lessons of the past few months, how he'd let go of shallow goals and discovered what really mattered. I told him stories about his father, about my own struggles and victories, and about the Coleman ancestors whose values still shaped us. The house creaked around us in that familiar, comforting way as the night grew late. When William finally stood to go upstairs, he paused on the 7th step, the one that always squeaked. You know what I keep thinking about? He asked softly. That kitchen table at the wedding. How humiliated I felt when I saw where they'd seated you. It was hard, I admitted, but now I see it differently, he said. They thought they were insulting you, but really, they showed their true selves. The kitchen table is where real life happens, where families eat, laugh, cry, and tell the truth. They didn't insult you at all, Mom. They put you exactly where you belonged, at the heart of it all, not off in some showy corner. Tears stung my eyes. That's a very generous way to look at it. It's the truth, he said, kissing my cheek. Thank you for keeping my place at this table. Even when I didn't deserve it, I stayed behind, running my hands across the old oak surface that had seen generations of Coleman laughter and tears. Wedding banquets and fancy seating charts might display status, but real kitchen tables hold something much more precious, the messy, beautiful truth of family life. William had finally found his way back to the right table, and I had been here all along, saving his seat. 2 years later, William was standing beside me again, but this time at Savannah's Historical Society. A bit to the left, William, I suggested as he adjusted the display case, holding my great-grandfather's letters with Ralph Waldo Emerson. Under the warm museum lights, the old paper seemed to glow, the handwriting still alive with power more than a century later. Perfect, Robert Bennett said, satisfied. As the main supporter of the exhibit, he had checked every detail. The contrast with Thoreau's manuscripts is striking. 2 years had changed everything. Our family's collection was no longer locked away but shared with the world in rotating exhibits, while the heart of it remained in our home. It was no longer just our private treasure, it was part of history. William stepped back and automatically reached for Vanessa's hand. On her finger, the modest sapphire ring sparkled softly under the lights, a perfect fit, just as I'd known it would be. They'd been married for 8 months now. The wedding wasn't fancy, just a sweet little ceremony in our backyard under the oak trees. About 60 guests came. We served homemade food, and Charles's old records played in the background. There was no assigned seating, no stiff arrangements, just friends and family sitting wherever they felt comfortable, talking, laughing, and enjoying the moment together. The catalog looks beautiful, Martha, said Elizabeth Bennet as she joined our group with her usual perfect timing. Things between her and Robert had changed a lot since Newport. They were still married, but now their relationship felt more real, built on honesty instead of pretending. At first, Elizabeth had pushed back against the changes in her husband and daughter, but over time, she found her own way to live more openly. Thank you, Elizabeth. Your foundation's help made this possible, I said as I accepted the exhibition catalog she handed me. The cover featured one of Emerson's letters, and it looked stunning. The scholarship fund is already getting applications. Her face lit up with real joy. Accessibility was always Robert's passion, she said. I'm learning to value it myself. Across the room, I spotted Veronica talking with the museum director. She had finally built a professional reputation in the arts world, not just through her family name, but because of her own skills. The annulment of her marriage hadn't been the end of her story, but the start of her finding herself. Our relationship was polite but no longer strained, helped by the surprising friendship I built with her father, and by Vanessa, who had brought back the sisterly bond they'd lost through years of rivalry. Veronica still loved her New York lifestyle and her designer clothes, but now she also carried something more meaningful: self-awareness and respect for values different from her own. 5 minutes until doors open, the museum coordinator called out, sending the staff into a flurry of last-minute touches. William gave my arm a gentle squeeze. "Nervous, Mom?" he asked. I looked at him, so handsome in his suit, but this time wearing clothes that showed his personality instead of trying to impress. "Not nervous," I said. "Grateful." "For what?" Vanessa asked as she linked her arm through mine. "For kitchen tables," I said with a small smile. They looked puzzled. "For the places that bring us together as our true selves, not for show." William's eyes lit up with understanding. "From the kitchen table at the wedding to a museum exhibition," he said softly. "Quite a journey." Robert appeared just then, adding, "The journey matters more than the destination." But I must admit, this destination isn't bad at all. The museum's heavy front doors opened, and the first visitors came in, mostly local students and teachers. Given an early chance to see the exhibition, their excited faces as they looked at treasures usually hidden away in private collections made it clear we had done the right thing by sharing, instead of keeping them locked up. "Dr. Coleman," a young woman in nursing scrubs, rushed up to William, slightly out of breath. "Sorry, I'm late. Surgery ran long." "Maria, I'm glad you made it," William said warmly. He explained to us, "Maria was my very first surgery at Memorial. Now she's in nursing school, top of her class. Thanks to the Coleman Bennett Scholarship," Maria added, her eyes shining. "First in my family to go to college. This program changed my life." The scholarship, created after the success of the exhibition, had already helped 15 students from poor families. William and Vanessa personally interviewed each candidate, offered guidance, and stayed in touch as mentors, making sure the money truly made a difference. As the exhibition hall filled, I stepped back for a moment and just watched. William was deep in conversation with an older gentleman, explaining a passage with excitement, his hands moving as he spoke. Nearby, Vanessa was leading a group of middle schoolers, turning dry history into a story so alive that even the fidgety kids were glued to her words. "Penny for your thoughts," Robert said, suddenly at my side, handing me a glass of champagne. I accepted it, smiling, just thinking how different things turned out from what I once feared. He grinned, eyes twinkling. "You mean when my daughter tried to stick you at the kitchen table, when I thought I'd lost my son to a life of shallow appearances," I corrected gently. "When I feared the Coleman name would end up meaning expensive watches and country club memberships instead of books and ideas." Robert nodded, his face thoughtful. "We all reach that fork in the road, substance or show. I chose wrong for many years, built a big financial empire, but ignored the spiritual one." His words came out a little uneven, the way they always did when he was speaking straight from the heart. It reminded me that behind his polished image was still the son of a coal miner. "Your son almost made the same mistake," I said softly, "but he found his way back with help from an unlikely alliance." We clinked glasses gently, he and I, two people who had nothing in common on paper, yet shared something deeper. Values we'd learned late in life but embraced fully. "Mother," William called from across the room, waving me over. "Professor Johnson has a question about great-grandfather's notes." As I walked toward him, I caught my reflection in the glass of a display case, my silver hair neatly styled, Vanessa's touch, my simple pearl earrings, Charles's anniversary gift, and eyes bright with purpose. I wasn't the leftover mother-in-law pushed to the kitchen table anymore. I was a woman who had protected what mattered. The honeymoon that never happened seemed small now. That $93,000 trip to the Maldives had instead given life to the scholarship program, helping students like Maria chase their dreams, changing families for generations. Later that evening, after the museum reception, we all gathered where we belonged, in my kitchen. William and Vanessa, Robert and Elizabeth, even Veronica, who had flown in just for the event. The museum had been beautiful, but the real celebration was here around the old kitchen table, crowded with mismatched dishes and plates of homemade food. "A toast," Robert said, raising his glass. "To Martha, who had the courage to stand firm when giving in would have been easier. To William," I added, smiling, "who was wise enough to find his way back to what really matters." "Two kitchen tables," William said with a grin, "where real life happens." Our glasses clinked together, laughter filled the air, and for a moment, I thought back to that Newport wedding. Whoever placed me at the kitchen table that day thought they were insulting me. Instead, they reminded me of where life's real honor sits, and in doing so, They started the journey that brought my son home in every way that mattered. Sometimes life's biggest gifts come disguised as slights, and sometimes the true table of honor isn't in the front of a fancy hall, but in the heart of a home where truth, love, and food are served together. 5 years later, my kitchen table has grown, both in size and in meaning. William and Vanessa added extra leaves to make room for their twins, Robert and Charlotte, now 3 years old, sticky, giggling, messy, and perfect. The scholarship program has doubled, now helping 30 students every year. Maria, once William's first patient, now sits on the committee herself after finishing nursing school. The Coleman collection thrives too, half family treasure, half public resource, with William at the helm. He's learned from Robert how to keep it financially sound while making it accessible to the next generation. Even Veronica visits from time to time, bringing her adopted son. She still loves her 5-star hotels and her designer clothes, but she's also grown into someone who truly respects choices different from her own. Elizabeth has softened too, realizing that her grandchildren's sticky fingers on her silk blouses matter less than the joy in their laughter. Robert has stepped back from business, spending his days on foundation work and rare book collecting, often calling me to talk over new finds. And me, I still teach, though not as much. Some of my students are scholarship recipients, sitting in my classroom with fresh perspectives, breathing new life into the texts my great-grandfather once cherished. On campus, they call me Professor Kitchen Table. The nickname started as a silly misunderstanding. One of my students misheard something in class, but it stuck because it perfectly describes how I see teaching. Learning, like life, belongs at a table where people gather honestly, share openly, and listen to one another. The sapphire ring that once belonged to Grandma Coleman now has a partner, a plain gold band. William wears with more pride than he ever showed off those fancy watches. Whenever someone compliments it, he tells the story of 2 weddings, one in Newport, full of appearances and performance, and one in our backyard, simple and real. Sometimes, when the twins are asleep and the house has gone quiet, William and I sit together at the old kitchen table with books from the collection. We take turns reading aloud, the same way Charles and I once did. And every time Thoreau's words seem to echo through generations, rather than love, than money, than fame, give me truth. Truth. Sometimes it hurts, but it always changes us for the better. It was truth that showed itself when I was placed at the kitchen table during my son's wedding. Truth again when a $93,000 honeymoon was canceled and turned into scholarships instead. And truth that pulled our family back to what matters most. Not the table we're assigned, but the table we choose. Not the cost of the journey, but its purpose. Not the appearance of wealth, but the richness of connection. I run my hand across the worn oak surface of my kitchen table, feeling the little scratches and dents that have collected over the years. Each mark tells a story: holiday dinners, serious talks, tears, laughter. This table has held it all, strong and steady, gathering us through every season of life. In the end, there's no greater honor than having a seat at such a table. That's the truth, whether in a small Savannah kitchen or a Newport mansion. And it's a truth I'm grateful my son finally discovered, bringing our family full circle, back to where we belong. Together, real, at the kitchen table. That's today's story. If it touched you, leave a like and subscribe. And don't forget, share your own life lesson in the comments below.